Okay, good morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to the first STTA Open webinar of the year. We are thankful that you're able to join us this morning. Our topic today is collaboration models for sustainable development and tourism, with a focus on travelers philanthropy. We shall be led in this meeting by our founder and director, Judy Kafagona at STTA Kenya. But also speaking would be Professor Marina Novelli and Dr. A.B. Scott. So just a few reminders as we begin this webinar. We ask that you all stay muted during the duration of the webinar. There shall be a Q&A section at the end where we will be able to answer a few questions that you may have asked. The session is being recorded, and by participation, we are assuming that you've given your consent to be recorded. The recording shall be posted on our YouTube page, which is at STTA Africa. About an hour after the webinar is done. So at around 1:30, you should be able to go to the YouTube page and watch the webinar. We also have all the webinars that we had last year. We had 12 webinars, so all those are still accessible to be watched on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go watch them there. You may turn your camera on if you feel the need to, but it's not necessary. We can introduce ourselves in the chat just to get familiar with each other. The questions that you had asked to be addressed in your registration form have been forwarded to the speakers. Not all of them may be answered today, but if you feel a pressing need to ask the question again in the chat based off the discussions we have this webinar, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we shall look at it and try to address it. So now I'll pass you on to Judy, who shall lead this meeting. And welcome. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and Happy New Year. I'm glad to have you, to see the many of you who are able to join us today for this first webinar of 2025. We are definitely looking at having many more interesting conversations going forward. Out of interest, for those of you who may want to know, next month, I'll be hosting a hotel general manager from the coast of Kenya, who will be talking to us about very interesting, I've already had conversations, very interesting trends in domestic travel. Yeah, so stay connected and join us for the next webinar. But thank you for coming today. I want to appreciate all of you. In particular, I want to appreciate my co-host today, Professor Marina Novelli. If you are a regular in our webinars in 2024, you will notice that she was our guest in the first two webinars. Indeed, it is her coming to STTA through a fellowship program in 2024 that triggered the idea to start these webinars. I was sitting with her in the office in January of 2024. And after going through many discussions, and I was going to launch the trends and said, Prof, why don't we host a webinar now that you're here so that we can benefit from your immense knowledge and see what this has become. And so thank you, Professor, that you actually inspired the start and of this webinars. And we are here in 2025, energized to go on. And what a delight to have you amongst our first speakers in 2025. We also have Dr. Amy Scott, who is joining us today. Interestingly, Dr. Amy was a student, a PhD student of Professor Marina, but she's an African resident. Actually, she'll be talking to us from Uganda. She's interested in the travel philanthropy system, looking at the bigger picture. And today she's going to share with us the findings of their research, also from a book that they have co-authored with a professor with a very interesting title called The Business of Poverty in Africa Inside the Travel Philanthropy System. I think that would be a good read for all of us who are working with communities in sustainable development of tourism, those who are policymakers who are planning sustainable developments of tourism. Of course, students of tourism and scholars will have to do this, read this particular book. So today, we are talking about collaboration models in sustainable development of tourism. We will focus on travelers philanthropy. And when we're talking about collaboration models, in our minds, sorry for making that assumption, we were talking about a community collaboration model. How does tourism and travelers collaborate with communities? Because there are several models, and travelers philanthropy is one of them, and that's the one we are going to focus on today. But allow me, because of the work that we do as Sustainable Travel and Tourism Africa, has enabled us to interact with so many different models in collaboration models in sustainable development of tourism. We have come across, I think, from my table, you will see that I have come across, or as STTA, this is how we define some of the community collaboration models that we have encountered over the years. I always divide this. I'm not in a classroom situation or in a different situation. Otherwise, I would have shown a graph of where charity begins and where co-management and co-ownership is at the highest level of my graph. And it is actually resonates with the title of the book that has been co-authored, The Business of Poverty. You can actually see where charity and donation start and what they're able to do, and how co-ownership is transformative. So yes, there's a model of collaboration, community collaboration, that is we refer to as charity and donation. This model of collaboration is very patronizing, as we will see with others as well. It is about thinking what the communities need and giving it to them in the time that we feel is convenient, whether it's the travelers giving, whether it's the tour operators giving. Charity and donations includes programs that we have seen before, like Pack for a Purpose is about charity and donations. You pack a few things as you come to Africa and you deliver them. And during your travel, you leave them with your travel operator, or you take them to the intended beneficiaries who had not been contacted before to identify their needs. So charity and donations, we are all familiar with them. A lot of us do charity and donations. And yes, sometimes they work, most of the times they don't work. And I have this thing that I always call sometimes I call them in the language, the big nothings. By one of our plans this year is to again lead the publication of another book on the community collaboration models. And this is one of the ones that we call sometimes they can be big nothing. So charity and donation is a form of collaborations. Normally doesn't benefit the beneficiaries, doesn't give much value to beneficiaries, but is egocentric, it's patronizing. It's the person giving feeling like they have the say and they know what the beneficiary needs. Then we go to corporate social responsibility, and I'm not going to talk much about this stuff because I want to make time for us to talk about travelers philanthropy, which is the focus for today. We all are aware of corporate social responsibility. It's how organizations and corporates come together, decide that they want to make a difference, or decide that they want to intervene in a particular situation. Their intervention might be informed by global trends. It might be informed by national or regional trends. It might be informed by development reports. It might be informed by copying what others are doing. Yes, but at least a corporate gets together and decides that we are going to do this for this particular interest group. So in corporate social responsibility, the interest group is always predefined. In charity and donation, sometimes the interest group or the beneficiaries are ad hoc. In corporate social responsibility, at least they predefine who their beneficiaries are or their interest group, and then they organize themselves to collaborate or support that interest group. Sometimes there's prior engagement in corporate social responsibility, but that prior engagement comes in the form of information, not in the form of consultation or not in the form of assessment. It comes in the form of, and it's because the word corporate itself is a power word. You know, when you're a corporate X, Y, and Z, and you show up in a community and you have come to inform them about what you are intending to do with them, it is very difficult for the community to say yes. It's already a power relationship. Yeah, here is a corporate that wants to do a social responsibility, and they identify their subject. The subject is always the weaker partner, and in this case, the subject is always a recipient. Very, very hard for the recipient or interest group to question corporate social responsibility because everything is planned and predetermined. We are going to that particular community and we want to go and plant 10,000 trees with that particular community. So we go to the community, we've already decided it's 10,000 seedlings, we've already decided the day we are going to plant, we've already decided how we are going to come and how we are going to do it. We are only looking for community to give us access, and then because they're there, they are the interest group. Then we have what I call the benefit sharing models. Benefit sharing models were very common in East Africa or Kenya's, let me talk safari tourism for a long time. And the benefit sharing models, the most common one that you would find for community collaboration is where an investor will come and say, I want to list your land. I will pay you this much per month or per year. I think most of the payments were annual and not monthly. And then they would be like, for every bed night, every person who spends a night in my facility, I will give the community this amount of money. And this benefit sharing models, again, were very patronizing because they also came a lot with power relations. The communities have no idea of how you charge, how much you charge. And then, so if you tell communities that we're going to give you $5 per bed night for every person who sleeps, it looks like a lot of money. Or what was the determination of that $5? The formula of arriving at $10, the formula of arriving. So the benefit sharing models as models of community collaboration in sustainable tourism have been here for a long time. They are actually the basis of transitioning into what later on became partnerships in community collaboration. So benefit sharing models is where you get a percentage of what is generated, but that percentage is also not jointly decided on. It is one party determining what they are going to give. Again, comes with a lot of power relations and patronage, like I have said. Then we've got models of collaboration that are called a partnership. The partnerships of the 2000s in this country in safari tourism in Kenya, most of them collapsed. Most of them collapsed because they were mediated by NGOs. And you can see from the language, it's not a common language business. So most of the partnerships were mediated by NGOs, where the NGOs probably came in with an investment and then brought together investors, and they came in with the funds, brought together an investor and the community to form a collaboration partnership. those partnerships, most of the time mediated by NGOs, were designed more like projects and not like businesses. And that's why I say that most of the partnerships that we saw in sustainable tourism in this region, particularly in Kenya, most of them collapsed. They faced a lot of challenges because they were not defined and designed by business people. They were models for trying to promote, to encourage communities to appreciate wildlife and conservation more than making them business people or introducing them into business. And so there was a CBO, a community, and then there was a business partner with a business mind, and then you have a community with a development mind who is supposed to appreciate conservation and wildlife, and then you bring them together. Those partnerships, most of them did not work, but we have some that work. The ones that work are no longer partnerships today as they were designed. It's either the community took over, or the private investor took over, or the mediating NGO intervened, and then the situation was changed. Some of them are even, we have situations where some of those partnerships have ended in complete closures of some of the partnership enterprises that were started. But we also have good cases of partnership. I have seen good models of partnership in other parts of Africa, where the partnerships have moved from being co-owners and co-managers to transitioning the management and ownership of tourism enterprises 100% in the hands of the community, and it has worked. So partnership models can still work, and the mediation is not the problem, it's the model of how they are designed. I will skip travelers philanthropy because Ami and Professor are about to talk on travelers philanthropy in a bit. Corporate social investments. Corporate social investments go beyond CSR, which are one of, like I said, I already explained them. Corporate social investments are more engaging. They are collaborations that are co-designed by the partners, by those who are in the corporate, co-designs an engagement, an intervention together with the community where they want to do the intervention. And in this particular case, when it's an investment, one word, when we use the word, one thing comes to mind, that it is long term. It is continuous and it is long term. It's unlike the corporate social responsibility, which is a one-off. It doesn't have to be continuous. It doesn't have to be long term. The corporate social investments are long term, they are continuous, and they have been very transformative. This is where we have seen corporates that have gone into communities and have transformed an entire healthcare system or education system, worked together with the community in improving conservation. And we have seen creation of conservation areas that are thriving, that are successful through corporate social investment. The level of investment and commitment here is always much, 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 much higher than what you see in partnerships and what you see in corporate social responsibility and what you see in donations and what you see in benefit sharing models. Then we've got what we call joint ventures. Joint ventures is where we have a form of a partnership without those mediations of a third party. So we've got joint ventures where it is very clear that this collaboration is about us bringing land on the table, bringing the land value on the table, and the partner bringing money on the table, and we look at it together, and he said this venture is a 60-40. Yeah, we are 60% shareholders or 40% shareholders, and joint ventures are organized in that way that they are so clear. They are not ad hoc. There is nobody making a donation or a contribution. Even like in CSI, everybody is bringing something to the table, and we have seen a few successful joint ventures. Again, some of them are the community conservancies, where community established the conservancies and then invited investors to come. And then in that investment, there was an arrangement of an economic model. This is where we begin to see economics in the community collaboration. A bit of it in partnerships, bit of it in benefit sharing, but here in joint ventures, we see serious economic models beginning to emerge. That is the same with co-ownership. Also, we see economic models being given equal attention and not just the social benefits and environmental benefits. Then we also have the co-management of resources, and this is mainly got to do with natural resources that are found in tourism areas where communities engage. In co-management of resources, you will mainly find that those collaborations are with NGOs and not mainly with tourism partners. Or there is a mediating organization that is providing this support to co-management of resources and is bringing parties together. As I speak about this today, I have been paying lately attention to what's happening in the climate financing space and the green financing space. And my big question has been, where do I place this model? Because one thing is clear in this green financing and climate financing models that we see today with communities, whether they're communities in tourism or in agriculture and other places, we see a lot of patronage. I see a lot of benefit sharing where we are telling communities we will give you this much, but we don't get to the point where we are in joint ventures or co-management of this particular opportunity for green financing that is available. And so you see a lot of patronage in green financing. And green financing takes me back to the early days of ecotourism, takes me back to the early days of donations and gifts and a little bit of benefit here and there. But communities are not yet at the core of understanding what is going on so that they can say, okay, this is a model that we understand. It's a co-ownership, it's a co-management, it's a partnership. It's not clear what these green financing models of collaboration that we see in tourism areas, they are emerging, and they are emerging very fast. There are there are many documents that are being produced. I recently saw a very big, large document, a document running into hundreds of pages, and it's an NDA. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. A community is being asked to sign an NDA. The document has been developed by lawyers from Europe. The community has not had a chance for that document to be looked at by their local lawyers. But because there is a carrot that is being dangled and being told, if you sign this document, this opportunity is coming to you. These are the patronage systems that still exist a lot in community collaboration models that we see in sustainable tourism today. So the push is see the carrot, don't ask questions, just get it. Our lawyers are so good, they've already looked at it. You don't have to look at it. You can trust our lawyers, but you don't want us, our lawyers, to look at them. That is just a food for thought for anyone in tourism today who is getting offers of green money and green financing and climate financing. Please ask yourself whether this is a patronage model or is an empowering model. That's the difference in community collaborations. There are patronage models and there are empowering models. What we need today are empowering models. I will stop here now and I will bring my co-hosts who will now speak to us. I want to start by bringing in Professor Marina. And Professor, as you come on board, I want you to start by answering this question. Yeah. How did you develop an interest in travelers philanthropy that has led today to many publications along the way? And what has been some of the key lessons or things that you would like to share with us today, Professor?
Right. First of all, good morning, everybody. And thanks, Judy, for having us as co-host of this extremely important discussion today. As always, you are extremely clear in setting up the scene and just making us reflect on a number of things. And interestingly, I was reflecting when you invited me on my journey about my engagement in travel philanthropy. And for those of you who are in the audience today, obviously don't know my work, I think it's important to highlight a couple of things. And in this sense, I would like to share just a few things with you, starting from these photographs. Many of you may or may not know that I've been working in Africa for the past 20 years. In fact, last December marked 20 years of my work in the continent, which started in 2004 with this project in Namibia. I was invited by one of my former students to actually visit our country and kind of investigate and understand a bit more what was being developed in our country, particularly community-based tourism. And of course, that was for me a major eye opener because it was indeed my first time in the continent. I had worked on rural diversification models in Europe, and for me, it was very interesting to be exposed to understand the complexity of actually looking at rural diversification programs in the African continent. Fast forward 20 years, I've been obviously working in 27 countries in the continent and over 50 destinations. And I think my journey with travel philanthropy started pretty much in 2004 on this particular trip, where as obviously as a white middle class woman traveling to the continent, I was kind of exposed and I started questioning certain practices which didn't really tally with my values. And but I couldn't really put a finger on it. I couldn't really understand what is it that was problematic. And then obviously I went to the Gambia after this. I attended a responsible travel program there and again started taking my students to the continent. I am a child of what we call it the Live Aid. Obviously, I was born in 1973, 1985. I was 12 years old, and there was something happening. The Live Aid happened, in Europe. We were, particularly those of us brought up in a Christian Catholic context, the act of giving was pretty much part of what our values would frame, what the values that would frame our behavior. And again, at the time, I couldn't really picture at all if there was going to be any implication of situations like this, movement which were developing all seemed to be extremely good and extremely important. The helping the less fortunate was part of the way we were growing up. And so again, over the years, there were a number of big figures that pushed the agenda of travel philanthropy, pushed the agenda of giving in the various forms that Judy mentioned, from corporate to giving in all sorts of forms. Some of them extremely helpful and extremely important, some of them potentially questionable. But I think what made me my epiphany moment, my haha moment, was when in my recurrent travel, I was sitting in departure lounges in airports, primarily in here in the UK, and I could see flocks of do-gooders of all ages, all backgrounds, kind of departing Europe to go and save Africa. And when I say save Africa, I would say in quotation marks. And again, that once again made me reflect on the fact that there was so much going on and so many of those people traveling that started creating in me some kind of discomfort in seeing, children going to paint schools or teachers or so-called teachers going to teach English and all sorts of different practices, which if on one side we're framed by the act of giving as a good thing, I started questioning whether, as we often discuss with Judy, does doing good means doing it well? And that question kind of framed my work, the early part of my work on travel philanthropy, which started pretty much in the Gambia with utilizing my students. So, and again, I use Wangari Maathai definition of what travel philanthropy is, which is pretty much about, a form of democratization of giving. When you see that certain things don't work or you perceive as not working, you may wish to actually, how do you say, do it better. You want to do it better. So again, I don't know. I think I've taken my sharing off by mistake. Just a second. Don't know what's going on. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay, I can't. So it was like it's disappeared from my screen. Anyway, so effectively, so the bottom line was to try and see how can we move forward and do it better. Hold on. Sorry. I think I need to stop sharing and sharing again. Sorry for this, but my screen is going crazy again. All right. Can you still see it?
No, not now.
Not really.
Right.
You took it down.
Okay. Forget about it. I'll continue talking because again, it was more sharing the definition just to start the conversation. So fast forward a few years, work in the Gambia, taking my students for over 10 years on a program called peer-to-peer capacity building, where we delivered modules on niche tourism product development. And again, even there, the question I was receiving from my student was, what can we bring with us when we travel to Africa? And so the last, I would say, 20 years have been kind of framed by this lack of understanding that what we had been educated on was not necessarily the right path to take. So I started having a very critical perspective, which in a way was framed and became, I would say, the purpose of my mission as an Africa specialist to deconstruct what was perceived as the way to do things. And I mean, many of the issue that Judy mentioned today, I've probably experienced pretty much all of them. And so in 2015, I published my first paper on travel philanthropy, which was looking at the Plymouth Banjul Challenge implications. The Plymouth Banjul Challenge is a sport challenge, banger cars, traveling all the way from the UK to the Gambia with the idea of donating the vehicles and raising funds for specific issues. Again, all good intention, but then the repercussions on that became that you had a number of vehicles which reached the destination in very bad conditions, becoming scrapped cars, abandoned on side roads. And at the same time, well-intentioned donations, and it goes in the first box of Judy diagram, charitable donations becoming problematic on different levels, from creating dependency to creating intercommunity rivalry and a lot of other things. So you may wish to read the paper if you're interested in knowing more. But the reason why I'm saying this is because, in whichever form of travel and tourism experience, which may lead to some form of giving, my experience has been that there have been a number of complex repercussions that very often have been ignored, either for convenience, and Judy will potentially expand on that. Amy will expand on some of the findings of the research she conducted, or pretty much because there was lack of knowledge and much more. So, and I'm going to conclude with the last aspect. As Judy mentioned, Amy was one of my PhD students. Amy started with a master program. And then at one point, when my interest in this topic evolved, I contacted her and in 2017, and she was a businesswoman working in East Africa, running her own company. And I proposed her to actually come back to study and do a PhD. She became a ESRC scholar in 2018, and the rest is history. We have been colleagues since, and of course, the work she conducted in the continent has really shed light on the travel philanthropy system in ways that nobody else ever have done. So much so that besides a couple of other publications, we produced the new book that is coming out in April this year, defines a number of aspects of how travel philanthropy should be. So to conclude this kind of introduction where all this came, it's my call for the audience is to reflect to the good, the bad, and the occasionally ugly that sometimes we may encounter in our journey of trying to do good. And I mean, sometimes is not necessarily a willful doing bad. Is just that sometimes it's people don't tend to understand the implication. And so I think it is very important to make sure that when we come to engaging in travel philanthropy and willing to aid others, we do it through professional organizations such as, for instance, STTA, who may have a broader understanding of the dynamics in destination, or other organizations which may well have a better understanding of the geographical context in which you wish to operate. I'm going to stop there, Judy, and obviously give space to Amy to potentially present some of our findings and then open up for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that highlight. I think that background is important for many of us who find ourselves in this space, and we are engaging in travel as philanthropy. And we don't know that this dates back to the history of aid and how aid started flowing from the north to the south. Those dynamics are important to consider. I concur with you that most of the time, nobody goes out to want to do bad, but the circumstances and conditions may end up in aid that is not beneficial to the people. And now allow me to bring in Emmy. Emmy, the floor is now yours to share with us the findings of this very important study that you have done, and I know it's going to be eye-opening. Go ahead.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. And yeah, thanks, Judy, and thanks, Marina. That was great introductions. I think basically a bit of a forewarning. I'm not going to be giving you a presentation on all the warm, glowing charitable projects in Africa through tourism businesses. And I'm not particularly coming with a solution. But what I'm trying to say is we need to move beyond the do's and don'ts of travel philanthropy and the what we should give and who we should give to who, and start understanding the bigger picture. And so, Judy, you've talked about some really interesting models. And what I've found is that a lot of these are still very isolated models, and tourism businesses and the other stakeholders within the travel philanthropy system, whether they are the beneficiaries, whether they're the intermediaries, whatever the tech companies, whatever their roles are within the system, form part of a collective system which is across a landscape of a destination. And also that's within a destination, but also pre and post trip. There's involvement of stakeholders beyond that destination, but very much we're looking kind of at that destination level. And so the research that we did, what we've learned from our research, is it's time to be a bit more frank about the reality of travel philanthropy, of what we call travel philanthropy, and the importance of collaboration going forwards, because what we've very much seen is that we, as stakeholders of the system, have collective impact. And so being a player in the development aid landscape, whether you're a donor, beneficiary, intermediary, as I said, whether this involves giving money, whether this involves a pen or building a school or a well or sponsoring a child, it's a really, really loaded exchange. And this system is extremely complex. So it's not kind of what we give, and very much like you talked about with your models, it's the how is really important, and it's something we need to focus on. So really great to have this discussion. I can't share all the research. As I said, it's a really complex system we've revealed here about travel philanthropy. I'm going to share with you some relatively messy slides because I'm going to share what some of our research participants shared with us too, to give you a little bit of insight into some of the foundations of our findings. So at the start of this research, we set out to understand what was travel philanthropy as a term and as a concept. And by going over the different academic research on this and related topics, and also within the industry stuff published online, we found that the term was used interchangeably. And so there was a famous, there was a famous early saying that it was about the 3 T's, which was time, talent, and treasure to host communities, to host communities. But when you unpack travel philanthropy, it's far more complex than that. It's also called Traveller Philanthropy, I know, is the title of this seminar, which also raises quite interesting questions because, it's a lot about the tourism. It's been a lot about tourism businesses talking about their role and less actually about the traveller. So what I've done is, oh, hang on. I have just identified what it is that that the literature has kind of defined travel philanthropy is. So one of them is the input. So that's about the philanthropic resource and the source, so the who and the what. So a lot of people talk about travel philanthropy being a donation from travelers. They also talk about corporate fundraising for CSR, so voluntary donations or involuntary fees. It's also talked about as a vehicle. So that's using tourism. So that might be demand-led, so consumer trends, or supply-led, so product development innovation. It's about using travel and tourism to give. It's also talked about as a medium, so through tourism. So that's the aid chain of to the beneficiary. So tourism company as a channel or an agency for donations. And also a little bit about unmanaged and direct traveler donations. It's also talked about as an intervention, so by tourism. So that's a formal program which is implemented by a tourism company, whether that's a lodge or a tour operator or any other players, about a partnership, so community-led interventions with tourism companies, or about informal interventions. So that could be by a traveller or by a tour operator giving to a beneficiary. It's also discussed as an output or an impact from tourism. So this is about creating sustainable destinations. There's a bit of discussion about the results and consequences. More of that should happen, but that is the focus for some of the discussions around travel philanthropy. It's also talked about as a form of tourism or sustainable tourism development or a movement. So we've heard about it as part of responsible tourism segment, about the pro-poor benefits, ecotourism, transformative travel, about capacity building. It's about tourism as a force for good. So what we found is these discussions are kind of very disconnected. And so people have very different concepts about what this is. And so we took a step back and started looking at the bigger picture about what this really means as terms of concept, and that had to be redefined. And what we found was that travel philanthropy was actually best defined as an exchange economy. There's a lot more people in the system, as I said, than just the tour operators and the lodges, the other tourism suppliers. It is not a one-way transfer of good intentions to a beneficiary in need. It's just more complex than that. And what we found is that there's an informal system that's evolved, and it's built on a set of beliefs and emotions and behaviors, and these are all connected. And this system itself provides certain outputs. And to change the outputs of that system, we have to understand it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into what the system is and how we got to it. You're going to have to get into the book for all the details, because it's quite difficult to talk you through the whole thing in a short presentation and for you to see the details on the screen. So this is where the kind of beginnings of our development of the system began. A system is about a way to communicate a concept, which is an interrelated set of factors with a certain function. And systems have different perspectives. It means people use that system for different purposes. So we identified 5 different system purposes, which came from different stakeholders. We did the research in Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Ethiopia in a number of different tourism destinations, just to give you a bit of context. And we felt that there was a lot of emphasis on perspectives from tourism businesses or the industry in terms of what travel philanthropy is, and there was a lot of gap in the literature about local perspectives. So we put quite a bit of emphasis on really listening at the destination level about what other stakeholders see as the system. So I'm just running 2 screens here. So these are the 5 system perspectives. 1, capital for conservation and development. 1 was direct philanthropy, social license, the business of poverty, and a tourism product. So, for example, direct philanthropy was pretty straightforward. It was about a primary donor giving to a beneficiary, or via a secondary. It's pretty linear. A linear perspective of what philanthropy was. It was about donating something from a donor to a beneficiary. Capital for conservation and development, Judy's talked a bit about that in her intro. So there is both the tourists and the corporates who are raising funds to pump into conservation or development within these destinations. This may go via community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, or via corporate foundations run by tourism businesses. The social license was a pretty significant part of the system, and this is a kind of mini system in itself. So you have tourism businesses and communities who are looking for licenses to operate within that community. There are different there's trust between local donation intermediaries and tourism businesses, between tourists and tourism businesses. There's also trust between the government and tourism businesses, perks and licenses and concessions. So there's quite a system about, if you give, you get this certain social license, or if you receive. So it's a form of relationship, a big exchange relationship. The business of poverty is something, as you know from the title of the book, which we'll go into more detail about, but it's again reiterating that this system is not necessarily a system of pure altruism. There's different purposes of the system that it's being used for, and it's very much based on storytelling, often quite negative stereotyping of Africa, often told by Africans because it's something that sells, but also by businesses, and it's using very much. It's a kind of exchange relationship based on emotions, and you can see some of the quotes here. I can't actually see my screen very well, but I can't see my screen behind all the. Can you read that, or is it too small? Too small.
I can read. I can read.
Yeah. So basically, there are some stories that come out of here. The ones I can see behind all of the. Hang on. Is what you'll find is, when you're speaking to the beneficiaries of the donors, say of tourism businesses, of lodges, or of tourists, they have a different perspective than just being this passive beneficiary. And it's very important to understand that, because this system is made up of beliefs and behaviors, as I said. So you've got, this was a in Zimbabwe towards the top was a head of a school, actually, and a tour operator had a relationship with that school in terms of bringing their tourists to come and visit the kids, hand over pens and the normal experience, and sponsor their children and give books and that kind of thing. And so, when you really dig and have these deep conversations with the different stakeholders within the system, you start to understand the nitty-gritty of it, and it starts to form what the structure and dynamics are. So, it comes up all the time how tourism businesses work for us. They have to be seen to be doing the right thing. So they're very much they're developing this exchange relationship, sometimes playing the game. But they understand that some businesses are there to make, they're using philanthropy as a marketing tool effectively. And so, as you can see here, it's not a partnership, it's them helping us. And you talked about power relationships. It's not always the power relationships from donor to beneficiary. There's quite a lot of evidence of beneficiaries steering donors, whether that's an individual in a local community, whether that's a school. And so what we found is that these exchange relationships, the power is really complex, and it's kind of evolved into this system, which there's some great things, but there's also some not great things. So basically this is what has kind of formed the basis of the system. This is not the systems itself. So I'll let you, when you go back over this, to have a look at that. But looking at the bottom of when I'm pointing to the business of poverty in Ethiopia, we found this was a system had developed on another level. So there was a lot of direct giving to children. It was very much evident in the north, in Lalibela, but it has spread as a system across Ethiopia. Obviously, that's changed now. Lalibela tourism has dropped off with the conflict up there, so it's quite interesting what has happened since. But what the community is saying, and they say the children have a special approach to change the mentality of the visitors. So they've developed this, tourists come, in the guidebook, it says do not give to children. Tourists come understanding that there's this kind of dynamic that's happening within the destination, but the kids have developed a system. They'll kind of befriend tourists on the street, and there's a few people who sit within an internet cafe who can write English. They develop their database of their tourists, and someone is there who can write the emails in English. And then they form that relationship when they've gone home, and then this whole system begins of child sponsorship. And some of the kids are having, they're having multiple sponsors and earning a hell of a lot of money. They're earning sometimes more than the government workers, and it's changing the social dynamics within that destination. And this is something that's quite specific to Ethiopia. In Uganda, you find that the intermediaries tend to be the local guides. So the local guides play a similar role to the kids there, but they play as an intermediary between the donor and the beneficiary. In Zimbabwe, we found that the tourism businesses were playing more of that role. So what we found across these different systems was that the same system emerged and the same roles emerged. So intermediary, beneficiary, donor, those affected by the donation, but the role occupants differed across the different destinations. And it was a really interesting finding. We thought we would find different systems in different destinations, but the whole structure emerged to be the same. So let me not go into more detail about this for the moment. So what is important to highlight is that this is something we're talking about that's in the real world, right? So this is a photo of marinas that was taken from somewhere on the Kenyan coast. And you can see that this tourism product that has been developed around philanthropy, it sits within the beach walk and the beach volleyball and going to a local school. And this is very dominant part of travel philanthropy. And it seems to be the norm, the accepted social norm, that it's fine to go and take strangers into a school and to hand things to kids that are not your own kids. And it's very, very disruptive in some of the schools. But there's this kind of belief that there's a need for it to happen to be able to have resources, because everyone needs more resources. And you've got these different community-based organizations that developed. You've got these tour operators who are promoting. You've got people who are trying to do things that you've got that don't give to children on the street. That's from Zambia and then you've got that's in Ethiopia on the top right. You've got that kind of direct relationships. You've got these very different relationships between the different stakeholders within the system. But it's real, and it's something we have to think about, because these impacts are significant. So let me move now into something which is you're not going to be able to read the details on the screen, but this is the final travel philanthropy system that came out of the research. As I said, a system is made up of different perspectives, which we've looked at the beginning, and the perspectives of a system affect how you behave and what you believe, and that underlies a system. The system is made up of different elements, and these can be tangible, these can be intangible. So some of these are, for example, we've got expectations. This is very academic, so I'm not going to go into two of the details, because we've got things like otherness and various things. But this is what this effectively came out of, is a collective impact generating system. What a system shows is that a system is not the sum of its parts, which you'll know that phrase very well. It's about emergence. So it's about the interaction of these different parts of the system that creates how the system behaves and what the outputs are. And so I'm not, as I said, I'm not expecting you to see the details. If you want to go into the details, that will be in the book. We go into details of every single element here. And it's just important to understand that we cannot change the system without understanding it. And so it's really important that we start having a frank conversation about this. I'm going to zoom into one part just as an example in a moment. But basically, this is an informal system that's emerged. There's no one at the helm. This is something that's happened over time. This has happened through as travel has grown, as our beliefs that giving is virtuous, as our beliefs as a community that we are entitled to receive, or that we are entitled to give, being a foreigner traveling to Africa. And as Marina said, this whole concept of giving and aid very much kind of became so popular in the 80s through the Band-Aid era or the Live Aid era, and then growing through this sort of growth of philanthropists and this kind of assumption that we have the right to rock up anywhere and to give, and that we have the knowledge and the expertise to go and intervene in development. And what we found is that whether it is, as I said earlier, like whether it is $100,000 that you're going to build a school with, or whether it is one pen, is so loaded that it can have an incredible influence on this system and an incredible influence on the output. And what's happened within the tourism industry is we continue to remain looking at our efforts and judging the good or the bad or as isolated interventions. And what we found is that if you give that pen, or if you fund that school through some clever model that is being innovated, you are part of contributing to this system. And this system is, it's formed of these complex beliefs and interactions and therefore impacts. And so because it's this informal system, there's no one sitting at the helm. It's not designed on a piece of paper. It's not like a system of a computer. This is an open social system that's influenced by human beings. It's influenced by external environments. And the bigger picture of these interventions is generally outside the stakeholders. And so what it's done is it's produced this kind of fragmented and unmanaged aid landscape effectively. It's very, very low entry barriers to be a donor and to be a recipient and to be an intermediary. Anyone can do that. There's no kind of oversight in terms of the right and wrong for who. It's just kind of happening and it's emerging. And so as I said, without going into detail, on the right-hand side in that box, you can see the blue underlying words are what we found, and we've done an analysis in the book, is what's underlying this system. And so there's a system of beliefs without those beliefs, such as that giving is virtuous, and that we have the right, we're entitled to receive, without that kind of, the travel philanthropy system wouldn't exist. So again, without understanding that belief structure, we can't change the system. There's also a range of principles and norms that underlie this system. So there's norms within a community about how to behave in terms of receiving or soliciting a donation, and the same within the industry, and the same within a beneficiary. So there's a number of norms that have developed, and ways to behave that are hugely influential. It's also a very emotions-based system. We don't tend to make decisions about investing in communities based on a lot of depth of research and proper formative evaluation. No, most of this, huge amount of it, is based on emotions. So in the business of poverty, we're often selling the woes of children to pull the heartstrings of a tourist to give money. And that could be a tourism business doing that. It could be someone in the local community. It could be the kid itself. And I talk about children because that is a huge part of where the philanthropy money is going through tourism, which is concerning in itself. And anyway, so underneath there, you can see what the underlying structures, mechanisms, and events are that produce this system. And without changing that, we can't change the system. And on the top in the green is what we've found are the outputs of the system at the moment. And without changing what that system is, we can't change the outputs. And they're not particularly positive, to be honest. And that's when you're looking at that bigger picture. And as I said, because there's no one at the helm, there's no one who's really controlling this, but collectively, if we really want to, if we want to work, we've got to collaborate to change what these outputs are. And so apart from the fragmented and unmanaged aid landscape, which is this kind of patchwork quilt of different projects and initiatives, whether it's direct giving from a tourist or from a tourism business or a CBO that's been set up by someone in the community to solicitate donations. It's also devalued development dollar. What for a lot of you work in the depths of Africa, you'll know that free doesn't really mean good in Africa. It's known within healthcare as well. If there is exactly the same medication and the same service from a government clinic and a private clinic, a lot of people rather pay the private clinic because they trust it. There's also, if people receive money without working for it, then it's really, really not valued, and they are more than happy to go to the bar and drink it away. Or they're more than happy to buy a TV than to put it into their school fees. So what we found is it's not necessarily what you give, but it's how you give it. It's the how. And I know, again, going back to Judy's models, there is some innovation now on how you give. But it's really important because how you give changes the value of that item, whether that is a pen or whether that is $100,000 or whether that's $10. So at the moment, the way that the system is operating is kind of kicking out a development dollar that doesn't have that much value. It could do a lot more effectively. We're also seeing a lot of youth and socioeconomic dependence and social costs. I focus on that because a huge amount of philanthropic money through travel is going to the youth. And as I said, in child sponsorship or to the youth in one way or another. And in Ethiopia, it is a huge, huge thing. As I've said, it's changed the power dynamics in houses. You've got kids who are earning a hell of a lot more than their parents and some of the government officials through this multiple sponsorship from tourists. And, there's a lot of alcoholism. There's a lot of crime rates are increasing because of it. There's some serious implications, and it's really important that we don't turn a blind eye to it as an industry. There's social and racial objectification. So again, this is two-way. It's not just a white tourist coming into a local community in Africa and assuming that someone's in poverty and believing that they can change the world to the way they want it to be, but it's also the other way around. It's both ways. It's just kind of multi-directional, but it's just developed this kind of us and them, and instead of kind of equaling, balancing these relationships across the world as we become more globalized, and it seems to be strengthening this objectification of who you are kind of socially or racially. And negative positive role models, this basically means that role models is incredibly powerful within the system. There's a lot of imitation. So imitation amongst tourism businesses about what to give and how to give and what to do. And there's a lot of imitation amongst the local communities about, which feeds into these norms and principles. And the negative positive role models means that the role models are being copied, but in a negative way. So there's kind of, again, this is coming out a lot on the local level in Ethiopia and Uganda, in terms of local communities. So again, more depth of this in the book, but just to give you an idea, when you look at what a system is and what its outputs are, you cannot change a system without understanding what these dynamics are within the system. And we as stakeholders, as an industry and as communities, and are all contributing to what this kind of interaction of human beings is kicking out, and what the structure that has formed. So, as I said, I'm going to oh, and this is just a quote which was kind of, I don't want to be all negative. I'm just being frank, and I'm just trying to spur a bit of a frank discussion. But this was said by someone in Ethiopia, actually, about what I was saying. There's the unintended consequences. So a lot of good intentions about sponsoring kids and getting them in a school, and fair enough, you come and you're new to Africa and that's what you want to see, and you believe that people should be in school. But it's actually having the opposite effect, because it's encouraging kids not to go to school because they're now out on the streets, trying to solicit more donations, because they come home and their parents are now encouraging it because they're bringing money into their households, and then they're seeing these crime rates go up, and then this long-term thing, and then so what you think is a good intention, like, don't feel bad about questioning good intentions, just feel good about seeing the bigger picture.
Thank you,
I need to hurry up, don't I? So this is the last.
Yes.
Let me
You
be
need
quick.
to summarize now. Yeah,
I'm going to summarize now. So basically, yeah. So to summarize, this is one part of the system, and why I'm focusing on it is because we're talking about collaboration. So I've just pulled this out because, as I said, in the impact of someone being at the helm, there's this limited responsibility and this kind of boundedness. So again, look at the book, but about willful blindness and about that kind of, is your responsibility beyond giving? Is it beyond to that broader part of the system? And that there's a lot of isolation in terms of how people are making decisions. And so yeah, so anyway, let me zip through to the end. And there'll be some quotes there for you to understand. But I think the most important thing is we have to drive collaboration, and we have to look at our decision. We have to look at how we behave beyond the boundaries of our roles and responsibilities, because the consequences, reach beyond that. So this is the book that's coming up. And as Donella Mello said, we can listen to what the system tells us and discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than could ever be produced by our will alone. And so that's it. And sorry, it's a complex thing to explain in a presentation, but thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a very, very deep knowledge around the subject of travelers philanthropy. And now I know, Emmy, I begin to understand why you refer to it as a system. There's very, very nuggets of wisdom and knowledge that I have picked from your brief presentation, and it encourages all of us to look for the book once it's available, to delve in and be able to teach much more. But I was, as I welcome, I know this presentation has already answered a few questions, but Prof will also lead in looking at some specific questions, because we received through your questions, we received more than 75 questions, diverse questions, and we sieved out around 25 or 22 that were related to today's topic. For the rest of you who have asked the other questions, I would urge you to remain connected, attend these webinars. All those questions will be answered in one webinar or another. But yes, Prof, there's a lot that has been said about by Emmy. This is an exchange economy. He's mentioned that exchange economies relationships are complex. It's not linear. We have to look at it from different angles. I liked what she said. We cannot change a system without knowledge. So knowledge is important. He mentioned that the traveler's philanthropy system is an informal system. It's an open social system. No one is at the helm. It's currently fragmented and managed aid. It's got very low entry requirements for donors, no oversight over what is right or what is even wrong. And the fact that the complex relationship between intermediaries, beneficiaries, and donors, and that in different countries the intermediaries are different. Sometimes it's the local guide, sometimes it's the tourism. Business. I also picked out the commentary or the finding around much of the focus being on youth and child sponsorship and the complexities that are coming with that, the implications of it, the imbalances that are being created in households by having children who are richer than their parents because they have beneficiaries of this aid. And of course, it all stems out from where you started with the age of the live aid. I now want to hand it over to you to pick it from here, answer some of the questions that you have highlighted, and also invite those who may have new questions emerging from the current presentation. You are also free to share. We are at a bit close to our hour. If you allow us to add just 10 minutes, I'll give this time to Professor to highlight some of the questions and the responses. But thank you so much, Emmy. I wish we had 3 hours to listen to you. Thank you.
I think, well, first of all, as said, it's difficult to capture the work of over 4 or 5 years and 10, if we like, into 15 minutes presentation. I think I've, out of considering some of the question which I've tried to group together, I think one of the point to actually reflect on is one of the other elements that was highlighted by Amy, which is the willful blindness. And willful blindness, and also the racial connotation that the exchange produced through tribal philanthropy has produced over a certain period of time. And I think it's like out of, as I said initially, whether it is out of convenience or lack of knowledge, I think it's now more than ever important to really critically assess the repercussions of whichever action we engage in. So if we talk about model of collaborations, once this knowledge is produced, I think it's important that people which are engaged in producing and developing tourism are very much aware of the repercussions. And although it's easier sometimes to ignore certain issues, and this is something that has happened in the wider development agenda, if we like, in Global South destination, I think what we are more and more pushed to do today, if it's true that we are talking about community-based tourism, which is, I see constantly as a subject discussed on LinkedIn at the moment from different perspectives and the way forward. The reality is, whatever the model we will be trying to develop or implement needs to be embedded in the knowledge that exists. And again, the book we have written is obviously an academic book, is sometimes not accessible to wider audiences, and is a battle I've been having with publishers that publish very expensive books. But the reality is that we are more and more interested in having those conversations to share the information and the knowledge that exists. So there was a question in particular which got my attention, and the question was, what is the right model? I don't think there is a right model. Okay, that's whichever if you look at the template that Judy shared with us at the beginning, not all are good, not all are bad, but certainly one of the systemic changes that is required as we move forward with pushing sustainable and responsible form of tourism in the continent, we need to make sure that we are aware that there are players in the game on both parts, right? Providers, receivers, donors, beneficiaries, which are in the game together. So the responsibility needs to be shared. Now, I don't know if there was any specific question, Judy, you wanted Judy and I to, sorry, Amy and I to pick on. I think it would be helpful if you wanted to have a specific question answered. You probably ask me directly or Amy. But I think one element also which is very important is that when it comes to giving, right? And in the landscape we are facing today, where, for instance, in the UK and Europe at the moment, there is a movement being developed, which is the anti-band aid movement, for instance, which is being launched just before Christmas. We need to be very careful that we don't create polarized perspectives, which may be detrimental. On one side, aid can create potentially a negative perspective about the African continent. There are evidence that some of those puristic approach to development of the continent has created more problems than anybody would have expected. But also we need to look at, I mean, I want to be the good cop as well and say there is a lot of aid and philanthropy which have created positive outcomes. So, but at the same time, we need to be aware of the fact that each and every player plays an important role. I would want to ask Amy to share with us, just to, in the conclusive remarks, I suppose, in relation to the questions that we were asked, if there was any particular question, Amy, that got your attention and you think would be important to answer in the context of the research that you conducted, because I think it's important to also give a perspective that although this research was primarily done deeply based on three destinations, the practice and the examples that were used are very much the praxis all over the continent. In the past, I've spoken about proxy destinations, right? I've spent considerable time in Kenya last year, and in more than one hotels, I was, faced at breakfast with the desk, of do-gooders, local do-gooders, trying to enthuse people to visit local schools, or the board that Amy shared with you of the activities of a resort, which promotes itself as being a responsible tourism resort. Sharing, one of the village tour and the visit to the school as the thing to do is, and again, is about changing the mindset of individuals. So, Amy, is there anything in particular that you think is worth mentioning in merit to the behavior that change that is required?
Before Amy speaks, Prof, allow me, one of the questions from the many that we had shared, and I know a number of them have been answered. Maybe we got, I would urge to listen to this again outside of this context and just put your earphones and listen to Amy's presentation. there's such rich and deep knowledge in there that we can pick in the quiet time when we revisit it. But there was a question about the place of travelers. How do they gain insights? Yeah. How do travelers gain insights on the issues that are relevant for attention? Who gives them this information? Where do they get it? How do they get it? Whom should they trust? At the moment, they trust that guide, they trust that beach operator, they trust the tour operator, they trust their safari driver, they trust everyone. Just like you say, there's no one at the helm. It's an unmanaged system. And in an unmanaged system, how does the traveler then protect themselves to ensure that they have done the right thing? There's no right answer. There's no one at the helm, but are there ethical things to do from your research?
Well,
Can I just give one very simple example? I often get friends calling me and asking me, Marina, you're very well experienced in Africa. I want to go to Africa and I want to do good while I travel, right? Is a question that I get all the time, which is a naive question for many, but it's not that naive. I've had a heart surgeon asking me how they could go to South Africa and teach in a local school. And my simple answer was, what are you trained in? Are you a qualified teacher? So that's why I think it's important to educate the traveler before they travel. And when we talk about responsible travel and tourism, it's about imparting responsibility in the way we choose what we do when we go on holiday. So what is right for you in your own country should be used in the same way in the other country. So my simple question I ask my friends is, would it be okay if an African visitors coming to the UK or Italy or Germany asked to visit one of the local schools? Would you be okay for a stranger to play with your children? Right? So this might be sounding like simplistic questions and simplistic issues, but I think it's important to make sure that travelers of whichever origin, because we are not talking about white middle class travelers only. I've seen this happening, for instance, in West Africa with the year of return in Ghana, in Nigeria, of Black African traveling from US, UK, and exactly replaying the exact behavior of global North visitors, right? So this is not about black or white. This is about people which are used to a certain systemic way of doing things. Okay, so this is another important aspect. Amy, please go ahead.
yeah, so
I mean, yes.
yeah, so I think the important thing is that it is not black and white. It's really, really contextual. And I think every destination has these similarities in terms of these dynamics, but there is, in terms of the who is responsible, is really contextual. So, and also there's a lot of what I put in the system as fear of role consequences. So there's a lot of concern amongst the communities who want to educate the tourists to not to give directly to the children and to go through different channels, but they're nervous on, it's about this the whistleblower. So that people are really nervous about having consequences within their community about that they're going to be stopping the resources coming in, even though they know that it's creating the bad consequences. In Zimbabwe, we had this discussion and also discussed that the relationship a visitor has is really different in different destinations. So the relationship in Zimbabwe is with your driver, not your tour guide, whereas in Uganda, it's with the tour guide. And within Ethiopia, there's more scope to have that direct relationship with a child and a community. So the way that the tourism product is structured affects that type of relationship. And that affects where that kind of responsibility, opportunity to, to educate a tourist or to educate a tourism business about how to operate lies. Does that make sense? So there is some great stuff going on. Don't get me wrong. There's advantages and disadvantages of travel philanthropy, but it's really contextual. But there's these kind of overlying themes, and that kind of bounded responsibility thing. It's where it's a big unknown and it's not talked about. We need to figure that out, and whether it's pre-trip, on-trip, post-trip, We just need to look at that bigger picture. There's no black answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ami. Thank you, Professor Marina, for those great insights. As we conclude, I just want to mention, if there are tourism operators that are here, that it's not completely a system that it's unmanageable. The fact that it has no one at the helm doesn't make it unmanageable. And this is what I always tell a tourism operator, based on what Emmy says, we cannot change a system without knowledge. So if you have the opportunity as an operator to be an intermediary for your guests to participate in travelers philanthropy, make sure that what you do is ethical. If you're giving them information, make sure that you have a community license, what I also call community approval. If you're saying that community is in need of water, you probably have done a needs assessment with that community. You have sat down with them. You have identified what the water need is, how it manifests itself. Is it access to clean water, or is it just access to water? Is it access to household water? What type of need is it? So that you have sat down with community and have received a community license of need. And even when you receive the community license of need, you've also discussed with the community how they want that engagement and collaboration to access clean water to happen. Do they want aid or do they want support? You want 100% donation, or they are looking for, there's some communities today that I have seen that say, we don't want aid, we want you to give us a loan or a grant and we will pay it back over a period of time. We want to create our dependence. So make sure that the type of license, you know exactly what the need is. It is not ad hoc. You're not waiting on the guest to tell you we have brought this or we want to bring this. And have the documentation of the processes and the system. And I always say, when you have a documented process with the community, and you have a traveler's philosophy, even when it goes wrong, and any project can go wrong, not just a traveler's philanthropy project, but what the defense of projects, even by big international banks, they go wrong. And I have been part of evaluating many that have gone wrong. But the defense of the organizations that participated in those projects is the documentation that they had. They're like, at that time, this is the information that we had. We made these decisions based on this consultation. We took on this because of this is the guidance that we received. But now, 3 years later, things have shifted very fast. And what we discussed 5 years ago and are implementing it 5 years later is no longer applicable. So we found these obstacles and challenges and all that. But if you have systems and processes that have been documented and paperwork, I have found that most in my work over the last 25 years plus, 28 years, that a lot of people, a lot of intermediaries, whether it is guides, whether it is tourism businesses, lodges and camps and tour operators, they don't like to document their engagements with community. They don't like to have everything written clearly and signed and evaluated. And if it is documented in year 1, you come in year 10 and there was no evaluation done in between. There was no things that, okay, did we evaluate this with community? Did it go right? Did it go wrong? Where can we get it right? And it's almost like you're scattering, in the Bible, it is said that Jesus gave the parable of the sower who scattered, and some of it fell on a rock, some of it fell on the roadside, was eaten by birds, some of it fell on thorns and was choked, some of it, but we don't come back. The whole story of the parable of the sower was that we never come back to check where we sowed. And so we could be throwing on the rocks and we could be throwing on the thorns and we could be throwing on the roadside. So evaluation systems are this is the kind of knowledge that should be built over time that then will make this system less informal and become more formal with time. And I believe that the amounts of investment that are being made through travelers philanthropy, if channeled properly, will create significant change in the community, not in one household, but in the entire community, without creating the imbalances that we have. So we have responsibilities to document, to share lessons, to review. And so a book like this should be the beginning. And Professor, some of us will make sure that as much as possible, we will have opportunities to share the findings of this book so that it doesn't remain in academic shelves, because it is important for the operators to know what is happening in this space of travelers philanthropy. You may want to do good all your years of operation as a tour operator, but what you're doing is harm to the community, and you have no way of knowing that there is a different way of doing it. So today we are actually saying, as we conclude, that yes, this is a system that has started without structures, that looks like it's ungoverned, but also its value by itself. How much, if I look at last year, I had the opportunity to do assessments of more than 15, I think even 20 lodges across Eastern and Southern Africa. And each one of them had a model of a travelers, of a community collaboration. And travelers philanthropy was a big part of that community collaboration model for sustainable development of tourism. And I can actually, from the different ones that I saw, I can agree with Emmy that there's no one way of doing it. You find so many different ways of doing it, and you keep asking yourself, where is the value? Does anybody care about the value and what happens, what goes on behind that giving? So we'll continue these conversations. Thank you very much. I hope that those who have been here, you have had your takeaways. I already gave you quite some takeaways from what Emmy said. I have done a lot of scribbling. I can't wait to get a hold of the book. But we hope we have opened our eyes to the whole concept of collaboration, models of collaboration. Question yourself. When I was doing my assessments, I used to ask the lodges, so what is your model of community collaboration? And they would look at me and say, huh? What do you mean model? We are working with the community. I said, no, there are different ways of working with the community. What is your model of community collaboration? So that knowledge is not even available to practitioners to be able to describe the type of model and collaboration that they have with the community. I want to give Marina a closing shot, but before I do that, Prof, I'll bring you just now. But allow me, I have seen some comments. Those ones are okay. But just in case there's anything that we're leaving out and somebody has a question that has not been addressed that wants us to talk about in 1 minute as Professor gives us the concluding remarks. Anyone? Any hands up? Okay. Okay, Prof. Go ahead, and then
I just wanted to briefly say I've shared a paper which was published not long ago, which is co-authored, led partly, obviously, well, mostly based on Amy's research. In fact, she's the first author, is the travel philanthropy document I shared in the chat, which obviously would normally be accessible only via academic platforms. So I've actually shared a PDF so that those in this audience who don't have access can actually access that. Is a good read. Again, is an academic paper, but it might give some further thoughts after the conversation today. Amy and I remain pretty much open to continue this conversation. We are committed to better understand and support businesses, academics, organizations to actually do this and move forward in the future in the best direction. I mean, as closing remarks, I just wanted to say, I think when we come to models of sustainable development, there is a landscape which sometimes I feel is like a bit of a minefield myself. And, some things may work, some others may not work. There are a number of documentaries being developed as well on good practices, and I think there are a lot of really important good practice that we should learn from. In fact, I think the next collaboration I would be calling upon, is with people like Judy and anybody else in this forum which may be interested in putting together a collective effort to actually share what is it that is really working and be honest about it, because the willful blindness I've mentioned more than once is really what I have come across as one of the major problems. And this willful blindness is creating some kind of tendency into maintaining the status quo because it's convenient, it's easier. There is a laissez-faire to say, it's working. Why would I want to change it, right? On the surface, it all seems good and well. But and then what happens is that this gives a bad name and a bad reputation to those projects which are actually working and doing a good job, right? So,
Yes.
we don't want to actually you to leave this presentation thinking, oh my God, travel philanthropy. I don't want to engage in this because I would like you to
No,
leave.
it's awesome.
Yeah, I would like to, those who have participated and those who would listen to this presentation, leaving and say, okay, there are issues. We are aware of those issues. We need to learn better what we need to do in order to do it well. And of course, trust those organizations which have evidence to show that their impact is there, that their effort is going to a good cause. And again, there are many who do that. And therefore, let's learn from those organizations. And those organizations who believe they're doing things well, please share your knowledge with us and the wider community so that we can move forward in the right direction. So this is my call for action coming out of this forum today. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, it does work. I can give you an example that I'm engaging in a corporate social investment. Maragall's Leadership School. It's not a traveler's philanthropy collaboration, but a corporate social investment where a corporate organization has committed long-term support for the development and the management and maintenance of the school over a period of time. And so they are able to tell you, we are going to engage in this school for the next 10 years. And then beyond that, we give you time to also look for other corporates that can come in and take over from where. So these models, they do work if they're properly managed. And like Prof has said, we are not saying that travelers philanthropy is doom and gloom. We're saying that if it is done well, the impact that it creates will even be greater. And it is a model that is here to stay with us because humans by nature, we are inclined and designed in ways that we want to give and do good wherever we can do good. And so everybody starts out with good intentions, and the results depend on the systems and the structures that are available on the ground. So remember, we're talking about empowerment, or whichever model you get engaged in. We're saying the models should be empowering and not patronizing. Ask that you may know, yeah, so that you will not act or do anything in ignorance. Emmy, you want to say something? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that because I know that I've raised some challenging points, right? But what is important is that this is the time for innovation and we have to think critically. So everything that's coming
Yes.
like critical thinking drives innovation, and the tourism industry and the system around it has so much potential to do great, and there are great things happening. But so this, what we're talking about is just to raise ideas about what you can think about and the questions you can ask, and don't worry about questioning the good in giving, and that's all. So I don't want to bring the doom and gloom, as you say. It's just to get people to think a bit more deeply and a bit more broadly.
Yes.
So that was it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There is good in giving. There is good in giving. It's not all gloom and doom. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your time with us. You will receive the link. Like I said, listen in again. And Emmy has just said it very well. This is an opportunity to innovate. Look at all the information that is available and innovate. And let's move forward. Have a brilliant day. Thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. And much, much appreciation to Professor Marina and Dr. Emmy, for spending your time and sharing your wisdom with us. I think my colleague would like to take some screenshots, and they're asking me if any of you would like to have your cameras on, and then we'll take our screenshots, and then we'll document this. You'll have the link for those of you who are at ease to do so. You are welcome. And Henzo will tell us when they are done with this. You're great. Thank you. Good to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Nice to put some faces to the names. Alois, thank you. Good to see you here. Thank you so much for coming. And I can see my mentees, Rafael Omondi. Yes, from the STTA Changemakers program. Thanks for joining. All right, Hanzo, just tell me when you're done. Okay, we're counting until 1, 2, 3. And done. Okay, not yet. We're done. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. I see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.
And remember to download the link. Marina has given you a resource you can read. If you go and look for it online, you'd have to pay for it. But she sent it on as a PDF. So please download it before you leave. It's on the chat. Download it before you leave so that you can have a read of it for free. Thank you, Prof, for sharing that. Thank you so much. I will give those who are downloading a few minutes before we check out. Could you reshare, please? It's just up. Okay, let me reshare it. Okay. I just downloaded my copy. Let's see if we can reshare.
I'm sending it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Send it again for
It's
those
coming.
who could have missed it.
Just come in. From MN. Travel Philanthropy is called the document.
There it is. Yeah. There it is again for everyone who could have missed it. Next month, we are talking about emerging models in domestic travel, experiences from South Coast of Kenya, how people are traveling. Let me give you some insight. One of the managers told me that the one who's going to speak to us, be our co-host next month, that it's very interesting that families are checking into hotels for 2 nights and then going to Airbnb for 3 nights. This is where it's happening. Yes, they noticed that the end of in December this year, their occupancies were low because unlike families who used to check in for 5 days or 4 nights, families will do 2 nights because the kids want a swimming pool and an exciting places to play, and then the rest of the time they go into an Airbnb and then they travel around. So that is one of the trends that they have noticed for these holidays. But there are many other exciting things that are happening, and it's important for us in the tourism industry and even planners, policymakers, academics to listen to them and just hear what's happening with domestic travel trends. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. I think everyone has had a chance to download. So thank you, guys. Happy New Year again. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.